I don't think the Constitution uses the expression dual citizen, and therefore your premise might have a problem.
I
But
know, but
again,
this
it
is
is
a
an issue
common
of
this has been a common saying that if you're an MP, you can't be an MP if you're a citizen of another country. I know I read the part you sent to me there, but still, somebody's not adhering to that.
okay. But as I said, the terms of the Constitution need to be readable. It's a document that is too long-winded. It's got too many terms that are meaningless, so that your eyes cross when you're trying to read it and understand it. And the fact is that the supreme law of the land needs to be something that is as readable as possible to the average person. It shouldn't be a maze that's impenetrable and that no one can understand, and that people spend ages debating just to get the meaning from it. It needs to be much shorter, it needs to be much crisper, and it needs to be something that people can understand. We have a bad habit that we like to fancy things up, and I think we got to stop that. We got to simplify things, because if we are a democracy and if it's meaningful to Guyanese citizens, they need to be able to look at it for themselves and figure it out. And I think that that's one of the issues that needs to be dealt with.
I 100% agree with you on that. The Constitution is very lengthy, and I think it has some description there that you're not even sure what it means. But that's enough for the Constitution. Tonight, our main topic will be on the Human Rights Commission, United Nations Human Rights Committee report or assessment of Guyana. But before we get there, a number of our viewers want me to talk about the cost of living and how it's affecting them in Guyana. Can anybody jump in on that? Tell us something about the cost of living and how people are struggling, or if they're struggling at all? Jonas?
Dr. Rose, if I may,
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
I do not think that anyone needs to be a rocket scientist to have some appreciation in respect to the cost of living today in Guyana. There's a weekly column in the Stabrook News. I think it's about the 60 odd edition. And in that column, what I appreciate about that column is that the journalist has taken the pains to ensure that those persons interviewed are across race, political affiliation, and geographical location. And there's a common theme that runs through the response from the majority of those persons who have been interviewed. And what is that common theme? That the cost of living is killing. It is unbearable, right? Now, some may want to argue that the cost of living index does not reflect that. But we are living in Guyana, and we know what has been happening in Guyana over the years. What has been happening is that our successive governments have been tinkering with these statistics in order to satisfy external financial institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. Right? The fact of the matter is that the ordinary citizens across race and across political affiliation are suffering. As a matter of fact, the most recent World Bank report I have come across suggests that approximately 30% of the Guyanese people are living within the poverty line. So one can imagine the kind of impact that the cost of living is having on that 30-odd% of persons who are living below the poverty line. I think a lot of people are being carried away by the pockets of conspicuous consumption that is seen around the place. That does not tell the true picture in terms of the suffering of the average Guyanese. As a matter of fact, I rather suspect that had it not been for the large amount of foreign remittances that continues to flow into Guyana, that the situation would have been much dire. I pause here.
Okay, thanks. Now, there are a number of reasons. Cost of living is worldwide. We know this as we speak today. In the United States, in Canada, in Europe, all over the world, it is high. But what are the main reasons for it to be this high in Guyana? Because I was in Guyana a few weeks ago and I stopped at the marketplace and I'm looking at these things. And I said, I can't buy this stuff. And I'm not from there, but it's so expensive. Now, I know we had drought for a little while and the farmers were unable to do the cash crops and because they did not have water. So you think that could be one of the root causes for the cost of living, Mr. Jonas?
There are a lot of variables you have to look at. You pointed to one, COVID and the Ukraine war and the disruption of the economics in terms of world trade shipping. That will affect our imports. But when you look at our imports and you compare prices, people would be astonished to see that in Guyana, apples are cheaper than mangoes. Apples are cheaper than sapodillas. Now, that's a big problem. An apple grown in Argentina, in Brazil, in the States, that travels all the way here, still cheaper than a mango that is grown in your neighbor's yard. Something's very wrong. And to get to the root of that, you have to examine a number of factors in terms of local cultivation and local growth. What happened with us is that we've had some funny weather patterns. And before that, we had COVID. And we have an uncertain system of delivery of produce from farm to market. So the farmers in far-flung areas, they don't get to the market. The farmers wait for the people who have transportation, who come to buy produce from them. And those people impose a markup when they sell the same produce at the market. Now, that is a system that I've seen farmers abused because farmers don't get a real price. And by the time it gets to the market, the markup is often over 100%. And a funny thing again is that prices don't go down. So that when plantain went from $40 to $80 to over $100 a pound in just the space of 4 years, I mean, price tripled. It never went down, even though the first excuse was COVID, the second excuse was weather patterns. It's still high now. And the lack of competition, the lack of a system in terms of the delivery farm to market, the lack of accountability, all of those things hamper us. What's equally sad is that a lot of those people who have been gouging, they're under the tax radar. They're not part of the system. So questions of NIS, income tax, real accountability don't even arise. And in the meantime, we've got a mad spending splurge on building roads, but we're not seeing those roads reach the farmers who need them. We have some problems.
Okay. Leland, let me ask you this. What do you think, or what mechanisms could be used to cushion the cost of living impact on the poor people in Guyana?
Well, for all the viewers listening to this program, the cost of living is in actuality the exchange of wages for services and goods. The ease of this exchange would make your cost of living better if it is easier to exchange money for wage for services and goods. Unfortunately, we don't have that situation in Ghana because the tumultuous experience and the great upheavals in bringing products, farm products to consumers is horrendous in Guyana. Guyana is a country that has long been called, even the name implies, the land of many waters. It is sad to say that our country that is the land of many waters rely too heavily on road transportation instead of riverian transportation, which is far, far cheaper, less cumbersome, and also less hazardous. How often do you hear a boat get into an accident as compared to a traffic vehicle on the road? In going back to the basics about cost of living, I would say this to you. Your ability to purchase goods and services has tremendously declined, tremendously. I'll give you a simple example. My father worked for $30 a week in 1970. How did I know? I was going to common entrance in 1970. In 1970, $30 a week would give you $120 a month. And that would have bought an ounce and a half of gold. Yeah, gold, the most stable currency in the world, gold. 1.5 ounces of gold for a 1 month's salary. What is a month's salary today? Or let me put it this way. What is the price of an ounce of gold today? On the today's stock market, it is $23.20, which is $524,000 for 1 ounce of gold. Who works for that? Why $524,000 a month? What we take home today is more paper, but less value for our labor and services. That's inflation to the zenith. There's a next issue concerning the cost of goods too, and people complain about the price of goods. I travel all over again when I go there. The salient point is that people complain about the price of Bora pepper and tomatoes and their backyard full of bush. Put it in a simple language. They spend 4 hours on a cell phone, but they will not go and fork up the garden to plant something. It's a bizarre situation. And what makes that country so comical is Ghana. I would say 8 in 10 adult persons in that country, 8 in 10 adults are millionaires. Ghana has the highest per capita millionaires in the whole world. It's like if you own a car in that country, you're a millionaire, because the definition of millionaire is that you own $1 million either in assets or liquidity. So it's a country with a whole lot of millionaires, but very, very poor people. There's something really wrong with the logic in that country. We, the land of many waters, find ourselves importing water to drink. Unbelievable. Look, we import this to drink from the United States.
Okay. Now, I want to turn to a topic, and Leland, you wrote extensively on this over the past years or so. Traffic accidents. There have been a massive increase in traffic accidents, especially motorcyclists and so forth. What measures you think should be implemented, Leland, to curb traffic accidents? I'll start with you first.
The first issue regarding driving on the road is that you must be licensed to drive. And therefore, if you have a license, it must be obtained legally with the necessary requirements and necessary training. One does not just get a license. Either you pay for it, which is very commonplace in that country. And if you do get a license, you should not be allowed to drive certain types of vehicles. And I've spoken directly to Mr. Kemal Jonathan, the former Minister of Home Affairs. And I've written to several letters to the ministers as well as in the press. If you get a driver's license, you should never be able to obtain a commercial driver's license. In other words, there should be different categories of license. Getting a license and then you start driving a minibus the next week is asking for trouble, dangerous trouble. Then you're supposed to have certain training in terms of transporting hazmat materials, hazardous materials, heavy loads like sand and lumber, and dangerous materials like fuel and other chemicals. Guyanese have a driver's license to drive, and they drive anything, anywhere, anytime. They don't have the necessary precautionary skills, they don't have the training, and they don't have the experience to be driving commercial vehicles. The issue of motorcyclists getting into accidents is because the motorcyclists are in a hurry to get somewhere, but they end up going nowhere because they're dead. The fitness section of the police force should be entirely removed from police control. It should go to a different sector of the country. I don't see police issuing driver's licenses as a good situation in that country, because the police force has been known to be the most corrupt, confused, and illiterate entity in the whole country. Look at the average education of a police officer, and you have your answer there.
Okay. Now, Mr. Jonas and Mr. Witter, the statistics I have here, 40% of motorcyclists do ride the bikes without a license. And 35% of drivers who drive vehicles on the road never go through a test, or a road test, or a written test. Your comments, any one of the two of you.
Well, there's a multiplicity of reasons, but I would wish to focus on two. One is what Dr. Rupnarayan referred to. You see, what we are experiencing in Ghana as it relates to road accidents is a microcosm of the wider society. You know. The two issues, one, corruption, where many of the drivers acquire their license through corrupt practices. That's one. And secondly, the level of lawlessness within the society, right? And this lawlessness is not restricted to the motorcycle riders, as you refer to. This lawlessness is from top to bottom, bottom to top, and across, right? You know, there's a saying that that monkey does what master do. Huh? Now, what is happening is that the ordinary people see the level of corruption and the level of executive lawlessness, and they feel that they can do the same, right? Apart from that, I rather suspect, and this will also can be considered a level of disrespect for the law and so on. There are too many persons who can be considered sacred cows. On a daily basis, you can see persons riding motorcycles, these racing bikes, right, without helmets, and passing, whether it's a police car or traffic policemen, you know, all the time. As a matter of fact, let me tell you what has been my observation. And this will tell you the extent of lawlessness within the society. If you were to take up a strategic position at a point where the traffic flows profusely, you will see that for every 20 motorists or even motorcyclists that is stopped by a traffic policeman, from the moment that person is stopped, he or she either gets out of the car or remains in the car and take and put their cell phone to their ears. Shortly after, that phone will be handed to the policeman. The policeman will speak to the person on the other side of the line. and shortly after, that person is set free. Whether the person would have committed a traffic violation or not. And you will see that happening with 9 out of every 10 cases. And I rather suspect that because of that kind of unnecessary interference, many policemen they have given up. You know, what sense would it make for me to stop an errant driver or motorcyclist when he or she can call someone on the cell phone and that person will instruct that the violator goes free, right? I mean, there may be cases also where the policeman may be denied having a race for that day because of the contact the person would have made with some senior person. And very often, it is either a senior policeman that they would have called or some political functionary. So that is a level of lawlessness and indiscipline that permeates society.
Okay. Now, Mr. Jonas, both Mr. Rupnarayan and Mr. Witter intonate to us that the traffic accidents and deaths are a result of a lawless society. Do you think that Guyana is a lawless society? And if so, what caused that? And what should be the solutions to it, Mr. Jonas?
Well, that changes the subject a bit. I would like to go back to what was said already.
Okay, go ahead.
Number of different factors here. We all, well, I don't know about you, Euclid, but I know the others on this forum, including me, we drive in Guyana. And let's start by removing the mote from our own eye. I would challenge the people on this panel to say whether they stop for pedestrians at pedestrian crossings, whether they obey speed limits. And let me tell you, I don't always stop for pedestrians and I don't always obey speed limits. So let's start with some honesty so that we can figure out why it is what it is.
So you're an errant driver?
One of the, Euclid, when you ask me a question, you will get honesty.
Okay,
One of the issues that happens in Guyana is that the traffic laws are uncertain, they are unclear, and they are unfair when you figure them out. There is no way that the speed limit should be 50 kilometers an hour on some of the 4-lane highways that we have. But it is. There is no way that you can expect somebody on Carifest Avenue, on home stretch, some places on the East Bank, some places on the East Coast, to be driving at 50 kilometers an hour, some places over the river going to New Amsterdam, on large open highways. But that's what it is. If the law is unfair, people will disobey the law. Guyanese know this from the time Burnham banned the flower. An unfair law begs people to disobey it. And if, therefore, we have a culture in Guyana of having grown up under unfair laws so that we ignore those laws, then there is no longer a standard of right or wrong or fair or unfair. The law should direct us as to what is the standard so that we are happy to obey the law. And therefore, the lawbreakers are in the minority. As long as the lawbreakers are in the majority, nothing you could do. So, if you are driving up Vlissinjam and you get to Ayangana, Thomas Lands Road, there is a bewildering maze of traffic signs telling you turn left, go straight, turn right. There's a merge lane when there cannot be a merge lane. So what you have is you have a bottleneck where 2 lanes of traffic become 4 lanes of traffic. And there's beeping of horns and there's all kind of ruckus because nobody knows what they should be doing. And therefore everybody does their own thing. When you combine that with the fact that traffic lights don't work or that there's blackout, and then you combine that with the reality that these two gentlemen have been talking about, corrupt police enforcement and drivers who grew up in this culture of lawlessness and therefore truly don't give a damn and do what they want, you have a recipe for disaster. But we got to start talking about solutions. The solutions are, first of all, to make the laws fair so that people like the people in your forum here are happy to obey the laws. And that will set a standard so that the majority of drivers who are careful and want to get where they're going safely are doing the right thing. The second thing is to take the aggravation out of the road use in Ghana. You got large goods trucks parking anyhow and driving anyhow in right side lanes, in overtake lanes, blocking traffic. You got minibuses going up on the parapet, overtaking on the inside. Driving in Guyana is a frustrating and aggravating experience. That can only be stopped if the majority are law-abiding so that the police can concentrate on the minority. And then you got the police themselves, who anytime they feel they're a bit late, turn on sirens and go speeding up the road and you have to move out of the way. These are my recommendations. If a police vehicle has to put on a siren, there should be a black box in those police vehicles. You're familiar with the concept of the black box on a plane. So that immediately a central point, a central administrative point in the police force is notified that the siren went on. And therefore, the operator of that police vehicle must explain the reason the siren went on, because you should only use a siren in an emergency. You are driving dangerously when you're jumping a red light. The purpose of the siren is to try to minimize that danger by alerting the people around you. You should only do it in an emergency. That will get rid of that aggravation. When a policeman stops you, there should be electronic surveillance on him so that he has to explain why he has stopped you. And if he has stopped you for speeding, the fact that now that you're having been stopped is recorded does not enable him to just let you go. Either you have a ticket or you have a summons to go to court. But he doesn't stop you and then let you go and say you weren't speeding anymore. He stopped you for speeding. So there must be an end result, a ticket or a summons to go to court, not a phone call, as we're talking about. And we've all seen this phone call. Unless there's a system and transparency, we are going to continue doing what we're doing. Now, you mentioned stopping at pedestrian crossings and you threw that back at me. But I will tell you I've had the experience, and I invite my colleagues to disagree, that I've stopped at a pedestrian crossing and a school child has crossed in front of me and another car has overtaken me going through the pedestrian crossing, and I am blowing my horn telling the school child, please stop walking because you're going to get run down in the pedestrian crossing. We got all kinds of problems. We got to start fixing it by looking at ourselves, but also thinking about how systems can work to make the whole thing work overall.
I agree with you, and a lot of people put on sirens, comment officials, and speeding through areas. I drove in Guyana many times, and I really run into some of them because I don't even know where they're coming from sometimes. But that's beside the point. But the point remains, though, when people are getting a driver's license, they don't do a road test or do the theory, that creates a problem in itself. And as I said to you, 40% of the motorcyclists in Guyana, you can go up to quarantine and ask the guys who ride motorcycle up there if they have a license. And all of them will say, no, they don't need a license. But the problem remains where the laws are not being enforced. And Tim, you rightly said, we have been a country where no one enforces the laws, or the laws are since born on band floor or whatever it is. People really retaliate against those things. But the point remains, though, we are at a time and a point in our life where people have got to respect each other. People have got to respect their lives, their own lives, as well as lives of others. And they've got to understand that we are our brothers and sisters keepers. We have to do the right thing to make sure that everybody is safe around us and not, only speed and speed and speed. The minibuses, those drivers, I don't know. Because my understanding is that a guy will rent a minibus from his boss. He got to produce X amount of dollars to his boss on a daily basis, and he has to have money for himself. So he will do anything to speed through any lanes or whatever it is to make a living. You know, it's part of a society where chaos reigns supreme. Now I want to turn to something that has been happening under quarantine. I know the quarantine, maybe other parts of the country too, suicide. Briefly, there have been more than 20 plus suicides this year in the quarantine alone I know of. My good friend is up there, and he does go to all these wakes and all these funerals. Just this week here, there have been 2 suicides just in my neighboring villages, a 16-year-old kid and a 20-year-old kid. My understanding is that the 16-year-old was talking to some girl, and his mom slapped him, telling him he's too young for that, and he went and killed himself. What do you think can be done? Let's start with you, Mr. Witter, to end this type of deranged mentality, killing yourself because of simple things.
Well, that's a very difficult question for me to answer. But we do have a Ministry of Social Protection.
Yeah.
And one would have thought, as a matter of fact, you would know that there was a point in time when the Blackbush Polder area was considered the suicide capital, not only of Guyana, but the Caribbean, right? And you are quite correct. I've been reading also of a few cases of suicide recently. And as a matter of fact, in one of the posts I saw, I think there was a young man, a young person of the age of 17. And I was forced to make a comment on that post. And that comment was to inquire as to what was the cause of this young man taking his life, right? I do not know if whenever these incidents occur, whether any proper inquiry is conducted, whether the relatives of the deceased not only are they given some kind of what do you call it?
Counseling?
Counseling, but also effort is made to find out what may have been the causation, right? What kind of studies are being conducted? I'm not hearing about any studies, right? And I think that ministries like the Ministry of Social Protection need to do more work in terms of prevention. I think in many instances, we do not make enough effort in preventing incidents, right? What we do is that we will, we will investigate after the fact, and that is not good enough.
Okay. Mr. Jonas, you want to say something on that? What the high rate of suicide in Guyana today?
It's hard to make a blanket statement, but it's a very, very sad issue that's going on in Ghana, and you are seeing it increased. We are one of the leading countries when it comes to suicide rates. I think you have to segregate categories. You mentioned the late teenagers. I know that there are women, and then there are people who are faced with the increasingly difficult burden of making ends meet. What happens, as I can see it, especially in the country areas, but also in the towns, is that there is a system of heavy-handedness and abuse in families that makes life really hard. Father lost his job at Kaisuko or not making enough doing what he's doing, cannot look after the family. And traditionally, assuming we're talking about a nuclear family, which I know is minority in Ghana, but let's use that standard to start with. His response to deal with his own frustration and his own sense of lack of self-respect, lack of self-worth, is to take it out on mommy. So domestic violence is huge. So you got the pressure on daddy, who not doing what he sees to be his job. And his outlet is alcoholism and domestic violence. Mommy, on the other hand, her approach to her children is not what it should be. We are a harsh people. There is no nurturing. There is no gentleness. There is judgment. There's licks. So the domestic abuse is just not just husband to wife, man to woman. It's adult to children. You beat someone because you're stronger than them. Men stronger than women, men and women stronger than children. There's no other reason. And that does not create a nurturing environment to allow anything to develop or grow. So if you don't approve of your child's choice of partner, whether on the grounds of class, race, money, gender, high level of suicide among homosexuals, serious pressure for anyone that's seen to be deviant, high level of suicide among people who parents say you can't be seen with that boy or that girl, they're the wrong race, they're the wrong family. We're not nurturing. We are oppressive. We learned that from slavery, we learned that from indentureship, and where other societies have progressed, we've gone the other direction. We become more harsh, less understanding. And that doesn't create an environment for happy growth. That creates an environment for tragedy. And that's what we see.
Leland, this topic is dear to you. I'm not going to explain that, but you want to make any comments?
Well, gentlemen, I have, I have embraced suicide very, very personally, and the reasons why suicide is prevalent, especially among Indian people, as of like 10 years back, it was mostly Indian people who were committing suicide, is because they have easy access to poison, being in agri-productive areas like Blackbush, that Mr. Witter just explained, right? Easy access to poison is one. But it's all about a cultural awareness and an education process that causes people not to understand what their problems are, and the only solution is suicide. It is also the government responsibility to educate people how to deal with problems. There are many ads in this country and many other countries. If you have a problem, call such and such, visit this center. When I was in Guyana a couple years back, I called a suicide hotline 16 times before a security guard answered the phone over a 3-day period. Now, assuming I was trying to commit suicide, I would have been a dead man now. But I just trying to say the Minister of Social Services is a total waste. In fact, most of the ministers in Guyana are not qualified for the jobs they do. They just get a job by being political, apartheid, yes men to the chief honcho and de facto president, and strong stalwarts of the PPP and the PNC, both sides. For you to be a minister, you must be technically advanced. You must be of sound reasoning. Don't worry about that MA, BA, PhD you have behind your name. Most of the PhD that we talk about these ministers, they buy it. They bribe and get it anyway. And Mr. Witter, just to indicate to you and the viewers, I am not Dr. Rupnoid. I don't have a doctorate. In fact, I don't even have a degree. I'm a University of Ghana dropout. My father took me out to University of Ghana because Burnham introduced national service and he didn't want me to go there, like so many, many other thousands and thousands of people. But coming back to suicide, as Mr. Jonas just mentioned, you lose your job and you think you're a disgrace to your family. In the United States, in the Scandinavian countries, and Canada, Holland, there is something called public assistance. If you lose your job, or if your income is insufficient for your family, public assistance gives you money as rent supplement, and they give you food stamps. In America, there's something called a food pantry where every week you can go and collect 35 pounds of food. And if you are disabled, it will be delivered to your house. That is what taxpayers' money are used for, to benefit the taxpayers. We live in a country where you pay taxes, but you don't see any benefits. Seriously, we don't see the benefits of the taxes we pay because as life goes by, we have become more and more culturally and socially impoverished and unmannerly. It's a country that has so much internal domestic issues that we have to find a way to start at some point to address this suicide issue. The suicide issue is not directly suicide, but it's an emotional impact that is created on an individual when they encounter a problem and they feel society will laugh at them, or they feel there is not a recourse because of the shame it will create upon them, that they end their life, especially in breakups with boy and girl. Girl feels no man is going to want me and me kill myself. The guy feels, oh, she left me for another man. My life is not worthwhile living. Let me end my life. It's an education process that this government has to seriously undertake, and this has been going on since Burnham days, 30 years now. And there is not a single ministry or department of any ministry like the social service ministry to address suicide in that country. It's a horror show. Ghana has the second highest suicide rate in the whole world. It's in the National Geographic publications. It's in Encyclopedia Britannica. It's in Wikipedia. Ghana has the highest suicide rates in the world. Ghana is a comical country. You have a population of 800,000 for the past 40 years. Population not growing. Road accidents and suicide and migration are the chief factors in that.
Okay,
So
let me turn to another topic before we get back to the main topic. And Mr. Witter, I want you to address this, but all of you as well. Trade unionism. It is not, the trade unions in Ghana today are not functioning the way they used to be over the past umpteen years. Why is that so, Mr. Witter?
There are a number of factors that are responsible for that, right? First of all, in historical context, one needs to appreciate the fact that all our past leaders, the Jagons, Burnham, name them, Ashton Chase, they were all trade unionists. As a matter of fact, the first, the original People's Progressive Party, which was formed in 1950, came out of the Political Affairs Committee that was formed by Ashton Chase, the two Jagons, Chedi and Janet. This trade unionists from the CCW, right? So in effect, what you had was a Labour Party. The original PPP was a Labour Party, right? Because you had Burnham was a part of the foundation member, along with Hubbard, that's the name I missed earlier, and the Jagons and Ashton Chase, the main persons who are responsible for the formation of the PPP. Now, what actually happened is that with these stalwart trade unions being the backbone of the labor movement, labor felt that, look, now that trade unions are in control of the political process, there is no need for us to continue fighting with that zest like before. As a matter of fact, they surrendered the movement to the politicians. The trade unionists become politicians. That is one. Now, given the events of the 60s, where labor played more than a passing role in the removal of the People's Progressive Party, that was after the split in 1957. From there onwards, it was the view of the leadership of both parties that it was dangerous to have a united trade union movement. Therefore, what happened is that the leadership of both the People's Progressive Party and the leadership of the People's National Congress did everything possible to ensure that the movement was divided and remained divided. So what you had is a section of the movement beholden to the PPP and another section largely beholden to the PNC. And that persists up to this point in time. There are unions within the FITOC Federation that are not only affiliated to the PPP, but are loyal to the PPP. And you have within the Ghana Trade Union Congress, while there may be independent unions, right? There are unions whose leadership are sympathetic. You would not have any union within the Ghana Trade Union Congress who are affiliated to the PNC, like you would have in FITOG, where GAU is an affiliate of the PPP, right? And this difference needs to be made here, because while you may have within the TUC the Ghana Teachers Union, where the General Secretary is a member of Parliament of the coalition, the union per se is not an affiliate of the of the coalition. On the other hand, the president of GAU, who sits as a member of Parliament of GAU, GAU is an affiliate of the PPP. As a matter of fact, GAU is considered the industrial arm of the PPP. So that distinction needs to be made. But the fact of the matter is that both parties are morbidly afraid of a united labor movement, given the events that took place within the 60s. So what you find is that whenever either of the party is in the government, they will do their utmost to ensure that those unions that are perceived not to be friendly to the administration, that they are emasculated, right? They are constrained, right? They are restricted. And one must see in this context the reason for governments, both past and present, because the coalition also is guilty of that, imposing salary and wages increases to workers within the public servants and public sector workers who are members of trade unions. Because when you take away the right for unions to bargain with their employers collectively for better salaries and wages and conditions of work, What you are actually doing is rendering the union irrelevant. That's what you're doing. You're emasculating the movement.
Okay. Okay, I will not ask the other members to comment because time is of the essence here. I'll get to the main topic. But before I do so, I want to, on behalf of the management and staff of Globespan Television, convey our condolences to the relatives and friends of Justice Bernard, Desiree Bernard. For most of you who don't know, Desiree is my cousin. Growing up, used to call her Sister Pat, Patricia Bernard. So she passed away this week. I don't know of any funeral arrangements, but may her soul rest in peace. That's the most I can say at this stage. The last time I saw her was in 2019 in Barbados. Okay, ladies, gentlemen, for our viewers now, let's go back to the pressing topic that we are here tonight for. United Nations Human Rights Commission points to a lot of things in Guyana in their assessment of the country. And they said there are a lot of things that need to be implemented in order for the government to function properly and the people them. One of those things they point to is to protect refugees in Guyana. Who are refugees in Guyana? Venezuelans? Mr. Jonas? We don't protect refugees?
It's interesting that you start with that subject, Euclid. Our infrastructure is frayed. Our systems are deteriorated to the point of collapse. And we have serious central issues just looking after Guyanese in terms of health, education, social welfare, safety. I'm curious that you started there, but I'll do my best to answer it. There's a big influx of Venezuelans into this country because Venezuela is on the verge of collapse. Anyone who has dealt with the issue of migration knows that the people who are migrating tend to be young, able-bodied, upwardly mobile, and also, unfortunately, criminal elements also tend to migrate. Now, we have our own issues, and therefore, for me, it is important for us to accommodate people who are in need, but it is also important for us to ensure that there is a system of registration, a system of supervision. If laws are broken, they're sent back to where they come from. But that while they're here, they are encouraged to honor their social responsibility by paying their taxes, by working honestly. And I'm not sure that that's being done. Now, we talk about free education, free health. Anybody who goes to Georgetown Hospital and has to sit down to wait for the service knows that's difficult. Anyone who's sending a child to public school knows that it's not working. We got the highest illiteracy rates in the Caribbean. How are we going to offer our deteriorating services free of charge to a number of migrants who can outnumber us at the drop of a hat? We just mentioned 700,000 Guyanese here. I understand that of the less than 500,000 population in Georgetown, already more than 10%, 50,000 in Region 4 is Venezuelan. Is that being monitored and regulated? How do we deal with that? One of the problems we're having is that our complete failure to try to implement any kind of system is leading to chaos. And unless we put it in check, we will be subsumed.
Okay. But when Guyanese were experiencing difficulties at home, they flee to all those countries, the Caribbean, Venezuela, all those countries as well. So we should be able to accommodate the Venezuelans because they're having the same problems right now. What do you think about that, Leland, briefly?
Well, the Venezuelans were kind to allow Guyanese to go there and work without being documented and even offer them documentation. So many of the Guyanese are returning home now and they have Venezuelan citizenship, even though they were born in Guyana. So it's a kind of straightforward conundrum. Who do you represent? Where do you belong? Are you Guyanese or are you Venezuelan? In the meantime, as Timothy just said, many criminal elements are coming into Guyana. Well, the United States is facing the same problem because a few days ago, a Venezuelan immigrant committed a murder. Then there was an issue last week where a Venezuelan immigrant assaulted his boss and stole his money. That was in the video went viral. But coming back to immigration, I would just like to say this. Guyana is not ready for any high influx of immigrants because they don't have the social structures needed to deal with immigrants, like tabulating them and monitoring them, because we will have a diaspora emerging in Guyana that we can't control. For instance, when Timothy mentioned that 40% of Region 4 are now Venezuelans, Timothy visits New York, you know that 90% of people in Richmond Hill are Guyanese. So we have to face the same problems that we have created overseas, how to deal with an influx of immigrants. America has a strong system to deal with it. They have the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice that can handle immigration. And even that has been overwhelmed now at the border in Texas and New Mexico. But immigration is a serious, serious matter in Guyana because the more people come into the country, the more strain will be on your health services, your supply systems like electricity, roads, water, and food. So we have a serious problem there. And now that we mentioned food, just last week, 500,000 pounds of, guess what? Cassava had to be flown, transported to an Amerindian person had called the PNC a set of thieves, and she and President White sued Father Morrison and Alexander, and she gave a decision that if you talk about the PNC, then you're referring to the hierarchy of the PNC. That means you're referring to the leadership of the PNC, and Father Morrison had to pay $50,000 in a legal suit that he lost. That's a very bizarre decision because the PNC could mean 200, 300,000 people in Guyana that are members of the PNC.
Okay.
So let her rest in peace. I hope we get better judges from that on.
I just want to make something clear, though, is that in the United States, an immigrant commits a crime, especially those coming from Latin America, Mexico, and those places. The media quick to pinpoint that, make it a public thing. But there are Americans who are committing worse crimes than these immigrants coming in here. So the media of itself is not fair, and some in the political or politicians who are criticizing these people, calling them animals, coming here to poison their blood and all sort of nonsense, they should know that this country, the United States, was built by immigrants. And
Absolutely,
but all of a sudden, they're forgetting all this right now. So history has been thrown out by some indeed. Anyway, what I want to jump to now, the UN Commission, Human Rights Commission said that there's an absence of laws to protect prisoners. They're not given proper health care. They're being treated poorly. And the remand system we have, they said some are in prison remanded for as long as 8 to 10 years. Mr. Jonas, I'll ask you to comment on that, being a lawyer.
Lawyers get blamed for a lot of things. I don't do criminal law. So I'll speak as a member of society, if you don't mind.
Okay, go ahead.
There's no doubt that the penal system in Guyana is in disarray. I invite you to look at pictures of, under the name Ben Shop. I don't know why it comes up if you Google it, but there are pictures of Camp Street Prison as it was back then. And then even that one burned down so that the facilities were even less. But they are overcrowded, they are horrendous, they're not well treated, they are not rehabilitated. And for me, the problem, again, we got to talk about solutions. The problem is that no effort is being made to find alternative punishments. Now, part of our oppressive and heavy-handed approach to laws is that we feel that if laws are broken, the penalties must be harsher. The penalties must be more harsh so that a lesson is learned. I believe that laws must be fair, and if possible, we must find alternative ways to rehabilitate folk than imprisonment, since imprisonment is not a means of rehabilitation. So the first solution is to try to reduce the numbers in prison. Immediately legalizing marijuana. Marijuana has been responsible for the incarceration of young, able-bodied Guyanese who, because they are incarcerated, become hardened criminals. Lives are lost because of that. We talk about road accidents, but I would advocate that drivers who break traffic laws need to lose their licenses and need to pay fines rather than incarceration. We need to find ways to reduce the prison population as a first step. The second thing that a lot of people overlook is that when a prisoner is released, when he's served his time and he's released, because he hasn't been rehabilitated and because nothing has been done to equip him to return to society, the only thing he could do is thief again. Often they're turned out on the roads without $1 in their pocket and with no family to meet them. What do you expect a man or a woman to do? Turned out on the street, your sentence has been served. You have nowhere to go. You got one option. You got to steal. So I would advocate for a system of employment in the prisons, even if it's cheap labor, building roads, digging drains, where you are paid an hourly rate. It doesn't have to be high. But what it will mean is that at the end of your term, when you are let out, there is a sum of money that is in your pocket that enables you to try to reintegrate into the society. We also need a system of halfway houses and a system of employment so that employment agencies can provide some kind of employment opportunity for a prisoner about to be released who has hopefully developed a relationship with an employer, even if he was just working as a laborer. But there's some prisoners there who have other capacities, so that when you leave prison, you have a chance. We got a long way to go, don't we?
One thing I don't understand, judges and magistrates will call cases to be tried. And every time they call a case, it postpones. They call a case, it postpones. I know of one case at the quarantine, a stolen bike. That case is now on for 3 years, and no one is not finished as yet. Every time a case called, postponed. Every time a case, why magistrates and judges don't clear the agenda and say, look, this case going on trial today, for the next week, we're going to deal with this case and clear it off there and get rid of it. They call cases and postpone. I don't understand that system at all.
I'm sorry, Euclid. That is a horrific simplification. Let me use the example you just gave. You have a case, and you say, let us just deal with it for the next week and get it out of the way.
Yes.
But to use your same example, you have 9 judges where you should have 25. You have half the number of magistrates that you should have. There are 99 other cases pending before that same magistrate, and you're telling him or her to forget those 99 and deal with this one and get it out of the way in 7 days.
Or whatever
so you
one
have 99 people who are aggrieved.
In front of them.
If you are, let me finish. If you are going to try to solve a problem, don't simplify it like that. Find the root of the problem. The root of our problem is that we have hard-working judges and magistrates who are trying their best to deal with the caseload and cannot, because we have 9 active judges when we should have 25. How in heaven's name do you expect, in our growing economy, our growing litigation, our growing legal system 1/3 of the full quorum of judges, and it should be more than 25. I challenge you to compare the number of judges in Guyana to Trinidad or Barbados or Jamaica, and then come back and simplistically criticize the judges. It's unfair. Let us be fair.
Then my question then is this: what the hell the Judicial Commission is doing? Why they don't go out and say we need more judges because we can't get the system going? Why someone has to be in remand for 8, 9, 10 years in prison? And when the case tried, maybe the person is not guilty, but he or she already served that time in prison. So the Judicial Commission, they should make recommendations and go public. But if they want to stay and hide behind closed doors, then nothing will be solved. We need 25 judges, as you say. We only got 9. We need more judges to advance the system. I'm coming to that just over the United Nations.
You've changed your focus completely. So your criticism is now against the body that appoints judges rather than against the judges. So we're stepping in the right direction. You mentioned
it. You said there were only 9 judges.
But then I would ask you, since you've changed the focus of your criticism, and correctly I believe, to consider how long it took to appoint the Judicial Service Commission. There had been none for years. And consider the political interference in the appointment of judges and in the appointment of the Judicial Service Commission, so that neither political party wants judges appointed unless the judges are perceived to be friendly or at least not unfriendly. So as long as you have political interference, you have a problem. We have to find the source of the problem in order to find a solution, or we're in serious trouble.
I'm saying
simplify this thing.
The Judicial Service Commission should make recommendations for the judges they want to have on the bench and not politics. The Human Rights Commission mentioned this, that our judiciary is not independent. And the government said they're going to restructure things to get it done and make it independent. But let me go to another question. I'll come back to that just now. They said also, and this for you, Mr. Witter, the structural makeup of GCOM exclude members from the small parties. They're being dominated by members of the 2 main parties. Indigenous peoples, disabled, and other ethnic groups are marginalized from GCOM, which means that GCOM is not an independent body, but is controlled by the 2 major parties, whichever one in government at the time. What have you to say to this, Mr. Whitaker? Mr. Witter?
That is factual. But just to say that the Carter's formula was intended to be a temporary formula. Now, what that formula says is that the government should nominate 3 persons, the opposition 3 persons, and it with an independent chairman. So you have 3 commissioners, 3 GCOM commissioners nominated by the PPP, and you have 3 nominated by the opposition, the PNC, and then what is supposed to be an independent chairperson. So what you have is a politicized GCOM. And if you have a politicized GCOM, then what you're likely to have, given the nature of politics, that on certain issues, the government opposition commissioners are going to vote down the line, 3. And the opposition nominated commissioners will also do the same, because that's the nature of politics. It will reflect what happens in the parliament, right? The independent chairman is now placed in a very invidious situation, because if the independent chairman votes with the government nominated commissioners, then she'll be accused of being, he or she will be accused of either being bought out by the government or beholden to the government. If the chairman votes with the opposition nominated commissioners, she'll be accused likewise of either being bought out by the opposition or being beholden to the opposition. What you need is an independent commission, free from political influence right? And political appointment. I don't know how they're going to arrive at that. You see, as I said, this current the Carter's formula was intended to be temporary, but it has since become permanent. Now, we are hearing about
it's 32
as
years.
we speak.
It's 32 years old.
Yes, as we speak, I understand that earlier today, the Constitutional Reform Commission has been sworn in.
Yeah, I
But
mentioned
that's
that
another matter. We'll deal with that later.
I mentioned that at the beginning of the show. Now, I want to jump to you, Leland, on this, but any one of you can weigh in on this. Now, the UN Committee on Human Rights is saying that the Procurement Commission is not independent or impartial, given the way contracts are being given out to a number of people in Guyana. The vast majority of contracts is going to a certain set of groups of people, and the rest are being left out. What have you to say about this, Leland?
Well, Dr. Rose, as the moderator, you have cautioned me many times about choosing the right words, but almost all the contracts given out are going to PPP supporters. This is a well-known fact. But one most comical contract was given to a person, a self-called media personality, and how somebody said that he's a very good critic. Got a contract for a pump station worth about $850 million. And here's a character that never even built a foul pen. Well, I'm glad to know that the contract has been pulled for the time being. But coming back to this procurement commission, people on that commission receive an $800,000 monthly salary. And it boggles me, what do they do for $800,000? I can name a few of them on some Joel Bagwandin, Dan Rajkumar, and a few others. They get a ton of money, and I don't know how this procurement commission can give a contract to a guy by the name of Guyana Critic who $850,000 to build a pump station, and he doesn't have any equipment, construction equipment that is. But then Guyana is a very strange country. It's a country where you legally elect a dictator based on the type of constitution that we have. And the previous government, as well as this one, have governed by the slimmest of majority, one seat, 33 versus 32. So this is what we can consider to be a tyranny of the majority. Constitutional reform, well, I'll tell you this. Since Dr. Jagan took office in 1992, the Carter Center has earmarked funds, and other entities have earmarked funds for constitutional reform. It's been more than 30 years now. We have had mediocre constitutional reform, if any at all. I mean, when you look at the Ramutar presidency and you ask yourself, can it get worse than this? Then comes Mr. Granger and you say, okay, this is the worst one. But then comes your finale and we're wondering, where are we going? Where are we going with this? In just a slight deviation, the Pagode message that he gave, he said we have no space for hatred, discrimination, and intolerance has no place in Guyana society. This is a rather hypocritical statement coming from someone who is saying that he has an all-inclusive government, and then you look at who is awarded these lucrative contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts. Then he keeps a press conference at Lenora last year, and the Kaichur News reporters were almost beaten up and thrown out because of the dare asking questions about oil. Apparently, oil is a very taboo subject for the VP and the president. So coming back to Guyana, you legally elected dictatorship, and when the United Nations High Commission indicated that why has the vice president not been investigated for alleged corruption after his tenant and confidant suit indicated that he collected money on behalf of the vice president. Gil Teixeira said no charges were filed because no one made a formal complaint to the police. In civilized societies like Western societies, any such accusation would have warranted an investigation. Then Mr. Shearer went on to state that when she was asked why Dr. Vincent Adams was removed from the Environmental Protection, she said he was part of the 2016 connivance production agreement that was a lopsided contract. Well, this lady has to be a total clown, because Dr. Vincent Adams came into the EPA in 2018, not 2016. He was nowhere part of the production sharing agreement. Then comes the vice president asking the United Nations High Commission, can you name the people who made these allegations against the PPP? I mean, you don't get more idiotic than this. Then Mr. Shearer, when questioned again about Dr. Vincent Adams, said, I strongly object to the propriety of this type of question. What is wrong with the question? It's a simple question. Why was he removed when he is a professional? And you have people like, say, Sarain Singh, as head of GCOM, that's not making any progress. GCOM produces sugar at 38 cents a pound, and our market price is 18 cents per pound. That's a most comical scenario, GCOM. But coming back to the United Nations High Commission, I'll tell you this. Human rights doesn't only have to do with police brutality. It also have to do with people's access to work, accessibility to work. In Guyana, you find only a certain strata of society can get contracts and get high-paying jobs. Regular people, especially if you're perceived to be an enemy of the PPP, you will not get a job. Never mind how qualified you are, you will not get a job. And the same thing with the coalition government too. If you're a very brilliant PPP technocrat in some field, IT, construction, they will not hire you because you know what? You don't sleep with them. And that is what is destroying Ghana. That poor mindset, that what you call primordial beastly thinking, idiotic way of thinking. If someone can do a job, I think they should get a job. It's the same when your house is on fire, you don't argue with the fireman. But we have a very poor system there. Another human rights violation is poor judicial sentencing. I'll give you two examples. There is a case where someone armed himself with a revolver, went into a house in Horstelling and shot someone. Justice Navendra Singh, and this is public record. You read the newspapers, you will find it. Justice Navendra Singh sentenced him at his trial to time served. Premeditated murder. The individual spent 4 years in remand, and then he was sentenced to that 4 years of time served. How idiotic could you get? Then there's a case where Justice Simon Ramlal Morris sentenced a person who was a conspirator to a murder, also to time served. This famous case of Boyo, this businessman from La Jealousy. One of his friends was on a lookout to say to the killer when he will be arriving home. When he arrived home, the killer went into the man's house and shot him 4 times or 5 times. You are an accessory to murder because you caused this to happen. And guess what? The lookout got a sentence of time served, which is about 3 to 4 years. And the murderer pleaded guilty to manslaughter and got 15 years.
Okay.
Premeditated murder. You leave your house with a weapon, wait for someone for hours, travel miles, shoot the person. That can never be manslaughter.
Okay.
That's an idiotic judicial system that
Mr.
we
Jonas,
have.
I want you to jump in on this.
I'll tell you one other thing. The Attorney General
no,
responds to a lot of nonsense that takes place in Guyana too.
Of
It
time,
takes 10 years for you to get the transport.
Okay, but that's another topic. Mr. Jonas, I want you to jump in on this here. The UN report says that there's a lack of institutional framework to combat corruption and to make the EPA accessible and effective. You want to comment on those two issues?
Right. Again, I think we need to step back and tone down the vitriol and try to understand how the systems work so that we can figure out what the solutions are to fix the system.
Right.
So, in terms of the award of contracts and the Procurement Commission, in the award of contracts, it's not the Procurement Commission that awards the contracts. So we need to understand that. But the system of awarding contracts is corrupt. There is no doubt that there's political control and political manipulation of it. And when you look at the Procurement Act, which does set up a system for tendering and pre-qualifying and that kind of thing. It is observed in the breach because it allows loopholes. For example, what they call emergency situations, where you can select 3 bidders to bid for a contract and award to the best bidder. Well, if you decide that your wharf that needs to be built or your road, and you arbitrarily decide it falls into this category, there is no doubt that there are situations where you are in, I've used this example before, you're in Pomeroon and you invite one bidder from Pomeroon, your friend, to bid, and the other 2 bidders you look for in quarantine. There's no way they can compete in moving machinery and that kind of thing from quarantine to Pomeroon. So you know who's going to win that bid. Now, the other problem with the act is that there are no penal consequences. For me, if there is a deviation from the statutory procedure, from the statutory safeguards, without just cause, somebody should go to jail. But there's nothing like that. There is no doubt that the Procurement Commission, which is obligated to review complaints about the award of contracts, is operating slowly and is selected by a preferential system that needs to be shaken up a bit. That's not going to happen because our statutory regime, the majority party, whether it's PPP or PNC, structure it so that they appoint the commissions and they place their personnel in all of these commissions. So that's not going to change unless we can get a change of the legislation. And the point is that if only those 2 parties are in the political landscape, one of them will win, and the one that wins will also control Parliament, so that none of these things will change. I'm afraid that's what we're seeing. We're seeing more of the same. We're seeing appointment by the minister of the various commissions, the various agencies, and because he controls the people that he appoints, he gets the result that he wants. That's not going to change. Now, I know that a lot of the people sitting looking at your program, Euclid, are saying, prove it, prove the corruption. Now, again, that is a stupid simplification because when somebody's stealing, they don't broadcast it and publish it, they hide it. You can't prove, and we haven't been able to prove 4 years later that there was an attempt to rig elections in 2020. But I know there was an attempt to rig elections in 2020. So to those same people who are saying no, prove the corruption, I have to say to them, prove the rig. Because you don't act wrongly in a way that everybody can see. You do it surreptitiously, you do it secretively. And the system needs to expose people who are trying to act secretively. And the system does not expose those people. And that is a failing in the system. Because just like every Guyanese knows that APNU tried to rig the election in 2020, every Guyanese knows that the corruption is terrible and is on the increase.
Good. We're coming to the end of the program. Gentlemen, you all did an extremely good job here tonight. Mr. Wither, I start with you with your closing remarks.
Well, it has been shown that you can have the best constitution, the best laws. We have some of the best laws in the Caribbean, you know, right? But if the political will is lacking and you don't have the institutional capacity to enforce the laws, then the laws will be a waste of time. And that is what we've been experiencing for the longest while. I think that to get us out of this juggling, the people, the responsibility is on the people to make the kind of decision to ensure that those persons who we place to lead us politically are persons of character. I think That is where we need to start from.
Okay. Mr. Jonas, your closing remarks.
We have a problem, and the problem is that half of the country blindly follows one corrupt organization, and the other half of the country blindly follows the other corrupt organization. The only way to break away from that is to hope that the small minority of Guyanese who recognize the harm in that, and the harm in 33 seats, controlling 100% of the country, change that system. And until we have enough people to change that system, so that we have a majority opposition in Parliament, and therefore there's a real balance and a real arrangement where the opposition have true decision-making power by virtue of opposition control of Parliament to balance government control of the administration, we're going to continue to get more of the same.
Mr. Rupnarayan?
Guyana's main problem lies in the constitution that we have. You see, when you are in opposition, you want the constitution changed because it gives so much power to the ruling clique. But when you become the ruling clique, you don't want the constitution changed because you like the power that it gives you. It's the hypocrisy of the both PPP and PNC. So I will end by saying this. Those who do not fight evil are part of the evil themselves, Mahatma Gandhi. And in the words of Einstein, Albert Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And if the people of Guyana continue to vote for PPP and PNC, there will still be this rampant theft from both sides. And who suffers? As the Swahili saying goes, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that gets trampled. And I end with a quote from one of the greatest men that ever walked this earth. Democracy cannot be achieved by it being enshrined in a constitution or being passed as a law. Democracy has to evolve as a culture of the people. Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Jonas. Thank you, Mr. Witter. Thank you, Mr. Rupnarayan, for your contributions. They were solid, they were sung, they were very, very good. And I hope that our listeners learn a lot from our program tonight. I want to say thanks to all our listeners and viewers. Thanks to our sponsors. And again, thanks to Noir Singh for making this program available. Devin Bissoon and Ryan Gobin. And thanks to all those who tune in tonight. Special thanks to all of you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Very good night to our viewers.